My name is Harper, and I am 34 years old. 2 months ago, I woke up in a sterile hospital bed, struggling to draw air into my punctured lung, only to discover a heartbreaking truth. My newborn daughter was being cradled by a paid stranger because my own mother, Eleanor, had chosen a night at the casino over the birth of her first grandchild. For 10 years, I had been the silent pillar of my family. For 120 consecutive months, I had wired $5,000 to my parents. That is a total of over $600,000. In all that time, through all that sacrifice, not once did anyone say thank you. But to understand the sheer scale of the betrayal that led me to this hospital bed, we have to go back 10 years to the day the first lie was told. I was 24 years old, a recent graduate living in Vancouver, and I had just started my first corporate job. I remember the exact moment my first significant paycheck hit my bank account. I stared at the balance, feeling a sense of pride and the first real taste of independence. Then, my phone rang. It was my mother, Eleanor. Her voice did not carry its usual sharpness. Instead, it was thin and brittle, like jagged glass. She was sobbing so hard she could barely speak. "Harper," she gasped. "It is your father. Bill had a stroke." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My father had always been the quiet, steady force in my life. I asked if he was okay, my heart hammering against my ribs. "He is stable," Eleanor whispered. "But the situation is dire. Our insurance is a nightmare. The medical bills are piling up, and we are already 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank is talking about foreclosure, Harper. We are going to lose the house." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I was young, naive, and fiercely loyal. I asked her how much they needed. "I hate to ask you this," she said, her voice dripping with artificial shame. "You are just starting your life, but you are the only one who can save this family. Sienna is still in school, and your father, he cannot work. We need $2,500 every month just to keep our heads above water." I did not hesitate. I set up the automatic bank transfer that very night. But before we hung up, Eleanor added one final condition that would become my golden cage. "Harper, you must promise me one thing. Do not tell your father. He is a proud man. If he knew his daughter was paying his way, the shame would kill him faster than the stroke ever could. This stays between us. Please." I agreed. Of course. I agreed. I believed I was being a hero. I believed I was the only thing standing between my parents and the street. Eleanor did not say thank you that night. She simply sighed and said, "This is what daughters do, Harper. We carry the weight." I spent the next decade carrying that weight, never realizing that the burden I was lifting was not my father's medical bills, but the heavy cost of my mother's secrets. As the months turned into years, the automatic transfer of $2,500 became a ghost in my bank account. It was a phantom limb, something that was gone before I could ever truly feel it. I adjusted my life around its absence. I stayed in a cramped, one-bedroom apartment in a less desirable part of the city long after my salary suggested I should move. I wore the same 3 professional outfits until the threads began to fray at the seams. I became the person who always had an excuse for why I could not join my friends for happy hour or weekend trips to the mountains. By the 3rd year, the demand increased. My mother called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice trembling with a new kind of urgency. "Harper, honey, your sister Sienna has finally found her calling. She is starting an intensive online marketing and branding course. It is her chance to finally build something for herself. But the tuition is steep, and with your father's new physical therapy sessions, we just cannot cover it. Can you manage another $1,000 a month, just until she gets on her feet?" I looked at my modest savings, the money I had been trying to set aside for a down payment on a home of my own. I thought about my father, Bill, struggling through therapy. I thought about Sienna, my younger sister, who had always been the delicate one, the one who needed extra protection. I said yes. The transfer jumped to $3,500 every single month. To make the numbers work, I took on freelance consulting projects every Saturday and Sunday. I stopped eating out entirely. I canceled my gym membership and started running in the local park, even in the freezing rain of a Vancouver winter. I told myself it was a small price to pay for the survival of my family. Then came year 5. The amount climbed to $5,000. "The roof is leaking, Harper," Eleanor told me. And your father's medications have doubled in price. The doctor says he needs specialized care. We are drowning, honey. You are our only hope. By then, I was dating Liam. He was a kind, observant man who worked in software development. As our relationship grew serious, he began to notice the strange gaps in my life. He saw my talent and my high-level position at work, but he also saw that I lived like a struggling student. One evening, while we were looking at real estate listings online, Liam turned to me with a puzzled expression. Harper, you have been a senior manager for 3 years. We both have great incomes. Why are we still talking about saving for another 2 years just to afford a deposit on a townhouse? Where does the money go? I felt a cold knot of panic in my chest. I remembered the promise I made to my mother. I remembered her warning that the truth would destroy my father's pride. I have some old debts from college, I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. And I am helping out a bit with my parents' house repairs. It is not a big deal, Liam. I promise. It was the first major lie I told him. It would not be the last. While I was drowning in work and secrets, I began to notice a disturbing trend on social media. I would finish a 12-hour workday, my eyes burning from the glow of my laptop, and I would pull up Instagram. There was Sienna. One week, she was at a high-end spa in Whistler, wrapped in a plush white robe with a glass of champagne in her hand. The caption read, "Self-care is a necessity, not a luxury. Thank you, Mom, for always knowing when I need a break." A few months later, Sienna posted a photo of a brand new, designer leather handbag that cost more than my monthly rent. She was beaming at the camera, her hair perfectly styled. The caption was even more painful. Best mother in the world. She knew I was feeling down after my breakup and surprised me with this beauty. I am so blessed to be part of a family that supports each other. I stared at that photo for a long time. I almost picked up the phone to call my mother. I wanted to ask how they could afford designer bags and spa days when they were supposedly 3 months behind on a mortgage. But then, the guilt would set in. I would tell myself that perhaps Sienna was just portraying a fake life for her followers. I would tell myself that Eleanor was just trying to be a good mother to the daughter who was struggling emotionally. I was a master at making excuses for the people who were draining me dry. My mother never asked how I was doing. She never asked if my freelance work was exhausting me. She never asked if Liam and I were happy. Every conversation was a transactional report on the latest crisis involving my father's health or the house. "Bill had a bad night, Harper. The heating system is making a strange noise. We are so stressed." That was her code. It was the signal that the money needed to arrive on time, or else I would be responsible for their collapse. By the 9th year, the total amount I had sent topped $600,000. I had effectively bought a luxury home for someone else while I continued to live in fear of my own bank balance. I had missed weddings, turned down promotions that required travel I could not afford to fund, and kept my husband at an emotional distance to protect a secret that was not even mine. I did not know it then, but the universe was preparing to strip away the blindfold. I was 33 years old, exhausted, and finally pregnant with my daughter, Maya. I thought that surely, once a baby was in the picture, the rules would change. I thought my mother would finally see me as a person who needed support, rather than a source of revenue. I was wrong. The pregnancy did not change Eleanor. It only made her more desperate to keep her grip on my wallet. And as I neared my due date, the lies I had been told for a decade were about to collide with a reality so cold and so cruel that it would break my heart and finally set me free. October 17th, Thursday, 9:47 in the evening. I remember the exact time because I had just glanced at my dashboard to check how much longer it would take to get home. I was 36 weeks pregnant, bone-tired from a late meeting, and the Vancouver rain was coming down in a relentless gray sheet that turned the city lights into blurry smears of neon. I was only 3 miles from my house. I approached the intersection of Maple and Fifth. I had the green light. I remember that clearly. Green means go. Green means safe. I was thinking about a warm bath and the nursery we had just finished painting for Maya. I never even saw the pickup truck. In a single heartbeat, the world became a kaleidoscope of screaming metal and exploding glass. The impact was violent, a bone-shattering force that threw my car across the asphalt like a discarded toy. I felt the airbag deploy, a hot, suffocating wall of fabric. Then came the pain. It was not a dull ache. It was fire. Every breath I tried to take was a jagged blade in my chest. Through the shattered window, I heard the distant wail of sirens. My hand fumbled blindly for my stomach, searching for the roundness that held my daughter. She was there, but was she moving? I could not tell. I tried to cry out, to tell the voices outside to save her first, but no sound came out. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was the terrified face of a young paramedic. The last thing I thought was a desperate prayer. Please, not her. Take me, but let her live. Then, there was nothing. While I was slipping into unconsciousness, Liam was 800 miles away in Seattle. He told me later that he was in his hotel room, reviewing code for a presentation the next morning, when his phone rang. The caller identification said Vancouver General Hospital. Mr. Reynolds, a voice said. This is Dr. Okonkwo. Your wife has been in a serious accident. She is in surgery now. Liam does not remember packing his bags. He does not remember the frantic drive to the airport or the way he begged the airline agent for a seat on the earliest flight. All he remembers is the crushing weight of the 6-hour wait before the next departure. He stood in the middle of the terminal, surrounded by travelers who were laughing and drinking coffee, while his entire world was collapsing. Is she alive? He kept asking the hospital over the phone. Is the baby alive? Your wife is in critical condition, they told him. She has a punctured lung, 3 broken ribs, and significant internal bleeding. We had to perform an emergency cesarean section. Your daughter is in the neonatal intensive care unit. She is stable, but she is alone. Liam felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He was a husband who could not reach his wife. He was a father who could not hold his newborn child. In his desperation, he did the only thing he could think of. He called my mother. Eleanor lived exactly 20 minutes from the hospital. 20 minutes. She could be there before the surgery ended. She could sit by Maya's incubator. She could be the face I saw when I finally opened my eyes. The phone rang 4 times before Eleanor answered. Her voice was cheerful, relaxed, and accompanied by a strange, rhythmic background noise. Hello? She said. Eleanor, it is Liam. There has been an accident. Harper is in surgery. The baby. She was delivered early. She is in the hospital alone. There was a gasp. A moment of genuine shock. Oh my God. Is she okay? I do not know yet, Liam said, his voice cracking. I am stuck in Seattle for the next 6 hours. Eleanor, please. I need you to go to the hospital, now. Maya is all by herself in the unit. She needs family. There was a pause. A pause that lasted entirely too long. In the background, Liam heard the unmistakable sounds of a crowded room, bells, electronic chimes, and the repetitive, digital music of slot machines. Tonight? Eleanor asked. Her voice had shifted. The shock was gone, replaced by a tone of heavy inconvenience. Yes, tonight, Liam shouted. Your daughter might be dying, and your granddaughter was just born. Please, drive to the hospital. Another pause. Liam, you know Sienna is on her Caribbean cruise this week. I promised I would watch her cat Whiskers. The poor thing gets so anxious when he is left alone in that big apartment. I really should check on him. Liam told me he actually laughed because he thought it was a sick joke. You are talking about a cat. Eleanor, your daughter is in the intensive care unit. I am asking you to drive 20 minutes to be with your own flesh and blood. Harper always has these emergencies, Eleanor said. Her voice turned cold and annoyed. Sienna never has these problems. Sienna is so organized, so put together. Maybe if Harper was not always working those ridiculous hours, she would have been more alert on the road. It is probably not as serious as the doctors are making it out to be. They always exaggerate for the insurance companies. Call me tomorrow morning when things have calmed down. The slot machines in the background chimed again, louder this time. She was not even trying to hide it. You are at a casino, Liam said flatly. I am having a night out with my friends, Liam. Is that a crime? Harper will be fine. She is always fine. She is a survivor, is she not? Besides, you married her. This is your responsibility now, not mine. Then. She hung up. Liam stood in the SeaTac airport, staring at his phone in absolute silence. In that moment, the man I loved realized that the woman who raised me did not see me as a daughter. She saw me as a nuisance that interrupted her blackjack game. He scrolled through his contacts until he found a name I had mentioned only once, years ago. While Liam was making that call, I was waking up to the blinding hum of fluorescent lights. A tube was shoved down my throat, and every inch of my body felt as though it had been crushed by a hydraulic press. I could not move my right arm. I could not speak, but my left hand instinctively flew to my stomach. It was flat, empty. A wave of white-hot panic surged through me. A nurse appeared by my side, her eyes kind but tired. "Mrs. Reynolds, stay still. You are in the intensive care unit. You have been through a major trauma." I pointed desperately to my stomach, my eyes pleading for an answer. "Your daughter is alive," she whispered. "She is in the unit downstairs. She is small, but she is a fighter. She is beautiful, Harper." I began to cry, the tears stinging the raw skin of my face. An hour later, they removed the breathing tube. My voice was a shredded whisper. "Where is my husband?" "He is on a flight," the nurse said. "He should be here within 2 hours." "My mother?" I asked. The nurse hesitated. She looked down at my chart, unable to meet my eyes. That hesitation was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It told me everything I needed to know. "No family has checked in for you yet, ma'am. You are currently listed as having no visitors present." My daughter had entered the world, and no one from my family had come to claim her. I asked for my phone. It had been recovered from the wreckage. The screen a spiderweb of cracks, but still functional. There were no missed calls from Eleanor. No texts from Sienna. Instead, there was a notification from Instagram. Sienna had posted a photo 2 hours ago. She was standing on the deck of a cruise ship, a tropical drink in her hand, and the sunset behind her. The caption read, "Living my best life. No stress, no drama. Just vibes. I am so glad Mom encouraged me to take this trip." I put the phone down on the thin hospital sheets. The pain in my ribs was nothing compared to the coldness settling in my heart. I looked at the nurse. "I need to hire a private night nurse," I said, my voice shaking with a new kind of strength. "I want someone to sit with my daughter in the unit. I want her to be held. I want her to know she is not alone, even if her own grandmother cannot be bothered to show up." I did not know it yet, but the 10-year reign of Eleanor's lies was over. The check was about to bounce, and for the first time in my life, I was not going to be the one to cover it. The hospital room was quiet, save for the rhythmic, mechanical hiss of the monitor and the distant, muffled sounds of the hallway. I lay there in the dim light, my right arm immobilized in a heavy cast and my chest tightly bound to support my fractured ribs. Every breath was a conscious effort, a shallow victory over the pain. But as I stared at the ceiling, my mind was sharper than it had been in years. The fog of duty and guilt that had clouded my judgment for a decade had finally been burned away by the cold reality of that night. I reached for my phone with my left hand. My fingers trembled, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of what I was about to do. I opened my banking application. The blue light of the screen felt like a spotlight on my own foolishness. I scrolled through the transaction history. There it was, month after month, year after year. $5,000. Out of my account. Into Eleanor's. I did the math again in my head, the numbers hitting me like physical blows. $60,000 a year. Over 10 years, that was $600,000. I could have bought a home in a beautiful neighborhood. I could have started a college fund for Maya that would have guaranteed her future. I could have retired early. Instead, I had funded a lifestyle of luxury for a sister who looked down on me, and a mother who viewed me as nothing more than an interest-free loan. I fumbled with the settings until I found the section for scheduled payments. My thumb hovered over the button. I remembered Eleanor's voice. "This is what daughters do, Harper." "No," I whispered to the empty room. "This is what victims do." I tapped the screen. "Cancel recurring transfer." A pop-up message appeared, asking if I was sure. I did not hesitate. I tapped yes. Then I did the same for the secondary accounts I had set up for their emergency repairs. Within 3 minutes, the financial umbilical cord that had nourished my mother's greed was severed. For the first time in 10 years, my money belonged to me, to Liam, and to Maya. A few hours later, the heavy door to my room creaked open. I expected a nurse with more pain medication, but instead, a tall, imposing figure stepped into the light. It was my grandfather, Charles. At 78 years old, he still carried the commanding presence of the man who had spent 40 years presiding over a superior court bench. His silver hair was perfectly groomed, and his eyes, sharp and discerning, softened the moment they landed on me. "Harper," he said, his voice thick with an emotion I had rarely heard from him. "My dear girl." I burst into tears as he crossed the room and took my good hand in his. His grip was steady and warm, a stark contrast to the fragile, manipulative touches I was used to from my mother. "Liam called me," Charles said, pulling a chair close to my bed. "He told me everything. He told me what Eleanor said on the phone while you were in surgery. He told me about the casino." I looked away, the shame still burning in my chest. "I have been so stupid, Grandpa. I have been sending her money for 10 years. She told me Dad was sick. She told me they were losing the house." Charles sighed, a long, weary sound. He reached down and picked up a thick, weathered manila folder he had placed on the floor. He laid it on the edge of my bed. "Harper, I need you to listen to me carefully," he began. "I have known for a long time that something was wrong. I am a judge. I was trained to see the gaps in a story. Eleanor has been telling me for years that you were the one who was struggling. She told the entire family that you were constantly asking her for loans, that you were financially irresponsible, and that she was the one supporting you." My jaw dropped. "What? I have never asked her for a single penny." "I know that now," Charles said, opening the folder. Inside were stacks of documents, bank records, property tax assessments, and printed emails. "I started my own investigation months ago. I have access to records that your mother thought were private. Harper, your father never had a stroke." The room went silent. I felt as though the air had been sucked out of the space. "What did you say?" "Bill had a minor dizzy spell 10 years ago," Charles explained, his voice cold and precise. "A flare-up of high blood pressure that was resolved with a change in diet. There were no massive medical bills. The house was never in foreclosure. I paid off their mortgage as a retirement gift to them 15 years ago. They have not owed a cent to a bank since 2011. I stared at him, my heart racing. "Then where did the money go?" $600,000, Grandpa. Where did it go?" Charles pulled out a spreadsheet he had compiled. "It went to 2 places. First, it went to Eleanor's gambling habit. She has been a high-stakes regular at the local casinos for years. She used your medical fund to chase losses that would make your head spin. And second, it went to Sienna. Every designer bag, every first-class flight, every month of her influencer lifestyle was paid for by your overtime hours." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The lies were so layered, so calculated. Eleanor had used my love for my father as a weapon against me. She had turned my own family into a pack of lies to fund her addiction and my sister's vanity. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I choked out. Charles looked down at his hands, a flash of genuine regret crossing his face. "Because I made the same mistake you did, Harper." I stayed silent, hoping that if I gave Eleanor enough rope, she would eventually choose to do the right thing. I thought a mother's love would win out over her vices. I was wrong. And tonight, when she chose a blackjack table over her dying daughter, she ran out of rope. He leaned forward, his expression hardening back into the judge I knew. "I am meeting with my attorneys tomorrow morning. I am changing my will, Harper. And I'm going to make sure that the truth about where that $600,000 went is made public to every member of this family. Eleanor is finished. And you are going to focus on being the mother to Maya that Eleanor never was to you." I looked at the folder, the evidence of a decade of betrayal. I thought about Maya, lying in her incubator downstairs. I realized then that my accident was not just a tragedy. It was a violent, necessary awakening. "I already canceled the transfers," I told him, my voice growing stronger. Charles smiled, a thin, proud line. "Good. That was the first verdict. Now, let us prepare for the sentencing." The heavy hospital door swung open at 4 o'clock in the morning. Eleanor and Sienna swept into the room, looking as though they had just stepped out of a luxury lounge rather than a family crisis. Eleanor's makeup was perfectly set, and she carried a designer purse that I now realized had been purchased with my own blood and sweat. "Harper, my darling," Eleanor cried, her voice vibrating with a theatrical, high-pitched worry. She rushed toward my bedside, her hands outstretched as if to comfort me. "We came as soon as we could. The traffic was simply horrific, and then we had car trouble. Stop, I said. The word was not loud, but it cut through her performance like a cold blade. Eleanor froze mid-step, her hands hovering in the air. Where were you, Mother? I asked, my voice steady despite the sharp pain in my fractured ribs. Liam called you 8 hours ago. You were 20 minutes away. But you chose the casino. You chose a cat. You chose yourself. Sienna stepped forward, her eyes darting nervously to Grandpa Charles, who stood like a silent sentinel by the window. Harper, you are being dramatic. Mom was stressed. We both were. You know how these things are. I looked at my sister, then at the woman who had raised me. I felt no anger anymore. Only a profound, hollow clarity. I have canceled every single transfer, I said. Eleanor's face drained of color instantly. 10 years of lies are over. The bank is closed. I want you both to leave. Now. Harper, you cannot be serious, Eleanor stammered, her fake tears finally turning into genuine panic as she realized her source of income had vanished. Get out, I repeated, my gaze fixed on the door. Do not call me. Do not come near my daughter. You are strangers to me now. For the first time in my life, I watched them retreat, not out of love, but out of fear. The room was finally quiet. 4 weeks had passed since the night the world broke apart and put itself back together again. My fractured ribs were knitting together, and the sharp, stabbing pain in my lung had faded to a dull, manageable ache. But the real healing was happening in the quiet moments at home. Our house in Vancouver was no longer a place of stress and secret freelance deadlines. It was filled with the soft, sweet sounds of Maya. She was a miracle, hitting her milestones with a strength that moved the doctors to tears. As Maya reached her 1-month milestone, Liam and I decided to host a small celebration. We invited our closest friends, my colleagues from the firm, and of course, Grandpa Charles and my father, Bill. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a way to reclaim our joy. But then, the messages from Eleanor began. They were relentless. She called 20 times a day. She sent long, rambling emails filled with apologies and memories of my childhood. I was under so much pressure, Harper, she wrote. The stress of your father's health made me lose my way. Please, let me be a grandmother. I cannot lose you and Maya. Liam was skeptical. Harper, she chose a blackjack table over your life. People like that do not change in 30 days. I know, I told him, looking down at Maya. But I need to know for sure. I need to see her one more time in my environment, on my terms. If I do not give her this final chance, I will always wonder if I was too harsh. I need closure, Liam. One way or another. The day of the celebration was a beautiful, crisp autumn afternoon. We had decorated the backyard with white lanterns and soft blue ribbons. The house was filled with the smell of fresh coffee and cedar. Around 2 o'clock, the guests began to arrive. Grandpa Charles was the first through the door, carrying a stuffed elephant so large it barely fit through the hallway. My father, Bill, arrived shortly after. He looked older, his shoulders hunched with a weight I now understood, but his eyes were clear. He spent the entire afternoon sitting by Maya's bassinet, tears shimmering in his eyes as he watched her sleep. Eleanor and Sienna arrived at 2:45, 45 minutes late. They walked in with a practiced air of humility, but I noticed Eleanor's eyes immediately darting around the room, tallying the cost of our furniture and the quality of the catering. Sienna was glued to her phone, occasionally snapping a selfie with a decorative pumpkin and tagging herself at a private family event. Harper, oh, my brave girl, Eleanor whispered, leaning in for a hug. I remained stiff, my arms at my sides. She smelled of expensive perfume and cigarette smoke. You look wonderful. And the house. It is so much nicer than your old apartment. It is amazing what you can afford when you are not paying 2 mortgages, Mother, I said quietly. Her smile flickered, but she did not break character. For the next hour, she played the role of the doting grandmother to perfection. She cooed over Maya, chatted graciously with my colleagues, and even helped clear a few plates. To any outsider, she was a woman seeking redemption. But I was watching her eyes. She kept tracking Grandpa Charles. Every time he moved to a different part of the room, her gaze followed him like a hawk. As the party progressed, I felt a familiar tension building in my chest. I stepped into the kitchen to prepare a fresh pot of coffee, needing a moment of silence. The kitchen island held our high-tech baby monitor receiver, a device that was synced not only to the camera in Maya's nursery, but also to the integrated smart speaker system throughout the house and the backyard. It was a gift from Liam's colleagues, designed so we could hear the baby from anywhere in the home. I was about to reach for the coffee beans when I heard a familiar voice crackle through the monitor. It was Eleanor. She had cornered Grandpa Charles in the library, a small, quiet room just off the main hallway. She must have thought they were completely alone. "Dad, please, we need to talk about the future," Eleanor's voice echoed through the kitchen. Because the monitor was linked to the main speakers, her voice began to bleed into the living room and the backyard as well, though it was still faint. I froze. I reached over and turned the volume on the receiver to maximum. Suddenly, Eleanor's voice was booming through the entire house, clear as a bell. "Harper is doing fine, Dad," Eleanor said. Her voice had lost all its warmth. It was sharp, calculating, and cold. "She has Liam. She has this house. She has her career. She does not need the inheritance. But look at Sienna. The poor girl is struggling. She has no safety net. It is only fair that you reconsider the split. If you leave the bulk of the estate to Sienna and me, we can finally have some stability." In the living room, the clinking of glasses stopped. My friends and colleagues turned toward the speakers, their expressions shifting from confusion to horror. "Stability?" Grandpa Charles's voice responded, his tone echoing with a judicial gravity. "You had $600,000 of Harper's money, Eleanor. Where is that stability?" "That was different," Eleanor snapped. "Harper owed us that for everything I sacrificed raising her, but this is about the long term. If you leave everything to Harper, it will just sit in a college fund or a savings account. Sienna needs it now. She has a brand to build. She is the one who will carry on the family name on a grand stage. Harper is just... She is just a manager, Dad. She does not appreciate the finer things like we do." I walked out of the kitchen and stood in the doorway of the living room. Every guest was staring at the ceiling, listening to my mother dismantle my life's work in favor of a cruise-obsessed influencer. Sienna stood near the buffet table, her face turning a deep, shameful red as she realized the entire room was listening to her mother's scheme. "And what about the accident, Eleanor?" Grandpa Charles asked. "What about the night you stayed at the casino while your daughter was in surgery?" "Oh, for heaven's sake!" Eleanor sighed, and I could almost see her waving a dismissive hand. "She was fine. I knew she would be fine. She has always been the difficult one, the one who craves attention. That accident was probably her way of trying to guilt me into staying home more. I am not going to let her health scares dictate my financial future. Now, are you going to fix the will? Or do I have to remind the family about why you and Mom really split up 40 years ago?" The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. Eleanor had not only admitted to her greed, she had attempted to blackmail her own father in the middle of her granddaughter's celebration. I walked toward the library, my heart steady, my mind clear. Liam followed me, his hand resting supportively on the small of my back. As I reached the library door, I pushed it open. Eleanor and Grandpa Charles both turned. Eleanor's face was a mask of triumph until she saw me. Then, her eyes traveled to the small, glowing baby monitor clipped to the bookshelf behind Grandpa, and then to the speakers in the hallway. The color did not just leave her face, it seemed to evaporate. She looked like a ghost caught in the light of day. "Harper," she whispered, her voice trembling. I was just... "Everyone heard you, Eleanor," I said. I did not scream. I did not cry. My voice was as cold and final as a winter frost. "The neighbors heard you. My boss heard you. My husband heard you. And most importantly, I heard you." I stepped into the room, forcing her to back away. "You did not come here for Maya," I continued. "You did not come here for me. You came here to see if there was still something left to scavenge. You are a predator, Mother, and you have officially run out of prey." I looked over at Sienna, who was hovering in the doorway, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. "Both of you," I said, pointing toward the front door. "Leave, now, and do not ever think about coming back. The bank is closed, the will is set, and the daughter you thought you could manipulate is dead. She died in that car accident. The woman standing in front of you now is a mother. And a mother protects her own." The silence in the library was heavy, a suffocating weight that Eleanor could not escape. She looked at the faces of my friends and my colleagues, and for the first time in her life, she saw herself through their eyes. She was not the doting mother she pretended to be. She was a woman who had been unmasked in the most public and humiliating way possible. "It was a private conversation, Harper," she shrieked, her voice losing its polished edge and becoming a desperate, jagged sound. "You had no right to broadcast that. You are trying to humiliate me and my own family." "You humiliated yourself the moment you put a price tag on your love, Eleanor," I replied. My voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the house. "For 10 years, I believed I was the one who was failing you. I thought if I worked harder and gave more, I would finally be enough to earn your respect. But you did not want a daughter. You wanted a paycheck. You wanted a ghost to fund your addictions." Sienna tried to grab Eleanor's arm, her eyes darting toward the exit. "Mom, let us just go. This is a disaster. Everyone is looking at us." "Go ahead," I said, stepping aside to clear their path. "Go back to your casino and your designer bags. But know this. You will never see Maya again. You will never hear my voice again. And you will never, ever receive another cent of my money. This is the end of the line." Eleanor turned to me one last time, her face twisted with a bitter, ugly fury. "You will regret this, Harper. You will need me someday, and I will not be there." "No, Mother," I said, as Liam moved to the front door. "I spent 10 years thinking I needed you. It turns out, I was the one holding everything together. I do not need you. I never did." I watched them walk down the driveway, two shadows retreating into the afternoon sun. Then, I shut the door. The sound of the heavy oak meeting the frame was final. The deadbolt clicked into place, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly safe in my own home. 1 year has passed since that afternoon in the library, and the landscape of my life has shifted in ways I never thought possible. The silence that followed the departure of Eleanor and Sienna was not empty. It was a peaceful, fertile ground where a real family could finally grow. Grandpa Charles was a man of his word. On the Monday following Maya's celebration, he met with his attorneys to finalize the new will. The terms were clear and uncompromising. 70% of his estate was placed into a protected trust for Maya's future education and security. 20% was allocated to my father, Bill, ensuring he would never be financially dependent on Eleanor again. The remaining 10% was offered to Eleanor and Sienna, but it came with a strict judicial condition. They had to complete 6 months of intensive, licensed therapy for gambling addiction and personality disorders before they could touch a single cent. Unsurprisingly, Eleanor refused. She viewed the condition as an insult rather than an opportunity for healing. Without the $5,000 I had provided every month, her carefully constructed house of cards collapsed with terrifying speed. The hidden debts she had accumulated at the casinos surfaced, and the house I had spent 10 years saving was sold to cover her losses. Eleanor now lives in a modest apartment, her days of luxury replaced by the stark reality of a budget she can no longer manipulate. Sienna's fall was just as steep. Without my funding, her influencer career vanished. The designer bags were sold on consignment to pay for rent. Today, she works as a sales associate at a department store in the suburbs. It is her first real job at the age of 29, and while she still sends the occasional bitter text message, I have heard through my father that she is finally learning the value of a dollar that she actually earned herself. My father, Bill, has become a regular presence in our home. He comes over every Tuesday for dinner, and the quiet, defeated man I once knew has been replaced by a grandfather who is deeply, authentically engaged. He spent years in the shadows of Eleanor's greed, but now, he stands in the light. One evening, while he was rocking Maya to sleep, he looked at me with tears in his eyes and whispered, "I am sorry I was a coward for so long, Harper. Thank you for being the one to save us." I realized then that while I could not change the past, I could give him a future where he was finally free to be himself. Grandpa Charles is our anchor. He visits every Sunday, teaching Maya how to recognize the birds in our garden and sharing stories of his years on the bench. He is writing his memoirs now, and he often asks for my input. "You are the one who understands the truth," he tells me. Through this journey, I have learned that guilt is not a synonym for love. For a decade, I allowed myself to be burned to keep people warm who would not even hold an umbrella for me in the rain. I learned that family is not defined by the blood that flows through your veins, but by the people who show up when the world turns dark. Every night, when I tuck Maya into her crib, I make her the same promise. I tell her that she will never have to earn my affection. I tell her that she is enough, exactly as she is. I am no longer the daughter who carries the weight of a mother's secrets. I am a woman who knows her own worth. I lost $600,000 and a mother I never truly had, but what I gained, my peace, my husband's trust, and a future for my daughter built on truth, is worth more than any fortune. The bank is closed. The truth is out. And for the first time in my life, I am finally home. This image is completely not real. It is just a product of Photoshop and AI, used to illustrate the content only. Don't believe in that, verify the information, and prove that this image is not real. The stories and images on this channel are inspired by real experiences and online communities like Reddit. For privacy and storytelling purposes, names, dates, and certain details have been changed or created using AI. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events, is purely coincidental. This content is intended for entertainment and emotional reflection only. Viewer discretion is advised. Thank you for supporting our creative work.